Welcome to the Invasion of the Remake podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bishop, and this week we are continuing our conversation about fantasy films. We started that at the beginning of the month with Lady Hawk, then Conan the Barbarian, and last week with Sword and the Sorcerer. With me today to continue this discussion is Sam Stepanenko.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Trish Coughlin.
Hey, everybody.
And you know what? I'm still having depression over the Cherub Woe.
Yeah, but grieving takes time.
Yeah.
You just have to get through it.
You know how I feel better about it? I turned on the massage.
Exactly.
On the new chair.
It's the new chair telling you everything's going to be okay now.
It's like that pat on the back. Everything's going to be fine.
But it's under your butt.
It comforts me. It physically comforts me. Today we're actually going to talk about a ton of movies because we haven't done a retrospective episode in a while. So, yeah, let's do that.
You betcha.
Because there's a lot of fantasy films out there. Not a lot of them have been remade. It's not something Hollywood tends to go back to too often.
To my great dismay.
Yeah, mine as well, because there's some good wells to be tapped there still. And
not just movies that have already been made, but books and graphic novels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, maybe they feel like when you've done a huge franchise like Harry Potter and then done Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, everything's kind of downhill from there. Like,
but that's not...
maybe it's just because of the expense of it to do it well. Like, Lion Witch and the Wardrobe hasn't been as successful, even though I think there's 3 of them now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's misconception because not all fantasy movies need to be Lord of the Rings.
No.
Please no, please no.
Well, you look at the 80s stuff, they're done pretty cheaply.
Well, and they're nice and compact, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's this preconception that fantasy movies have to be these great big epic stories that span thousands of miles and hundreds of characters, right, to tell this great sweeping story.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's lots of great short fantasy stories that can be remade or made into movies.
Or you have a character and you don't have to do their whole life. You can do one of their adventures. And if you want to do more of their adventures, you can. But
then you have a franchise rather than...
Well, like when we remade
series.
Beastmaster way back in episode 2.
Yes.
That's a nice, tight, compact fantasy film.
Yeah, but it's
has
also...
lots in it.
Yeah,
and had the potential to be a franchise.
Yeah, and still has that open world feel.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of locales that you see, but really, you start looking at movie trickery, it's a fairly compact movie.
Yeah, and fantasy movies can be compact.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need a whole universe right out the gate. You just need to establish it's there.
Yeah.
But you don't have to go to every part of it.
Yeah, well, it's not like you have to... You find a shooting location with lots of, areas, the different topical areas.
Like Alberta.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Alberta and BC, and now you can have all sorts of stuff within a small frame, and you can still shoot in the same province, or... I'm sure there's locations like that in the U.S. as well, but, if I see more fantasy films in the desert...
Yeah.
They always seem to be in the desert.
Yeah, it's like the Road Warrior effect. It's like, especially in the 80s, it's like Road Warrior came out and all of a sudden everything has to be shot in the desert. It's like, no, not necessarily.
Well, I think it's this concept that if you want to make it seem like another world, it has to be a desert, but that doesn't make any sense.
You know, I mean, we're Canadians, so I'm going to Canadian locales because I know them best.
Yeah.
There are spaces on Vancouver Island on the west coast that have these huge, massive old-growth trees.
Beautiful ones.
That would look fantastic in a fantasy film.
Exactly.
Right? And then we do have our desert out here in Alberta with the Hoodoos
Badlands.
and the Badlands, right? So you have within a reasonably close distance 2 really great settings for.
Well, you've got the ocean out in BC, you've got rainforests, and
You can
mountains.
Yeah.
And there's even a desert in BC, in the southern BC. There's a desert there too.
Yeah. I found out about that recently. I was like going, what? And somebody showed me. I'm like, oh my God, that is there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got a lot of stuff you can use and not have to travel all over the world.
Yeah, Calgary even has its own soundstage now. Filmmakers, just so you know.
FYI, guys.
Yeah, and it's top of the line.
People who are good at, fixing scripts, just put it out there.
Yeah, I don't know. There's 3 of them in the room right now.
Well, 2.5. I don't know if I really count. I'm a good idea guy.
Hey, the ideas are sometimes what need to happen.
Fair enough.
That's right.
I'm being self-deprecating.
It's got to be somewhere. So, I guess let's start with your favorite fantasy films, because there's was a time where there were a lot of fantasy films, especially in the 80s.
Yes.
What's the one you hold nearest and dearest to your heart?
That is a tough call. I mean, last week I talked about nostalgia and my lack of it for the most part, but there are a few films, and I think Dragon Slayer has got to be one of my favorite fantasy films from the 80s.
Wonderful movie, yeah.
I haven't seen it in a long time, but my memory of it still stands up, and I'm going to keep it that way.
Yes.
Until I decide we're going to remake it.
And then I'm going to kill Jay.
It's on my list.
Well, it is Dragon Slayer, so maybe Slay Jay?
Maybe Slay Jay, yeah.
I don't like the way this is going.
Yeah, but I think in terms, I don't know if I have a favorite.
But from a narrative, I have to stand in his way, and that's how that movie comes together.
There we go.
I don't want to see this movie.
But yeah, no, I certainly, in terms of fondness and fond memories, that's got to be one of my favorites.
Nice.
That's a great choice, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and you're right. There's a few. I have the 2, there's 2 that come straight to mind when people talk about these, and you talked about Beastmaster a long time ago. We rewatched it and we redid it. I still love that movie. I still think it's great.
Yeah. That would be on my list too.
And then the other one that I was remembering that I can watch again and again because it's got everything I like, where it's got the sword play and the roguish hero and, the strong female who's also a very accomplished swordsman.
And the comedic relief. And
you've got magic, and you've got just a lot of stakes, and it's Willow.
Yeah, I definitely put that on my list as well. Beastmaster, Willow, and Clash of the Titans. I think they're my 3. I don't know if I could pick out of those 3. They're the ones I certainly watch the most. They're big and grand in scope, show you lots.
And they stand up.
And they stand up.
That's true, yes.
Yeah, they are exciting and fun to watch.
Yeah.
And, we're going to talk about Clash of the Titans next week. So
yeah, the little clockwork owl.
Yeah. They're just,
Love it.
They ooze fantasy. It's in every shot of those movies. It's all over the place. Like when we talked about Sword and the Sorcerer last week, the title is Sword and the Sorcerer, and the 2 things missing are the Sword and the Sorcerer.
It's very misleading.
Yeah.
I mean, the sword's not really missing, and we talked about what we didn't talk about in the episode before we started recording here, and the sword's there, but it's got some questions around it.
Yeah, how does it even work?
How does it work?
When you got a sword with 3 blades on it, 2 of which shoot off, but you don't explain it at all. It just it's something they have. Explain it as a magic sword, because it shouldn't work.
It really shouldn't work.
No, and once you've shot a blade, do you have to just wander around and get him back, or do you get new ones made?
Do they grow?
Yeah, or is that part of the magic? Is that it gets new blades?
Yeah. If it grew blades, I'd be like, okay, at least I have an explanation now, and I'm okay with that.
That would be cool.
That would be very cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of there's a lot of questions about that sword.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we're done with that one.
Yes.
But when I think about fantasy in general, some of my favorites, I guess even though there hasn't been a ton recently, the best one in my mind that wasn't a major franchise was Pan's Labyrinth. In recent memory.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny because when we were talking about the fantasy,
and the fantasy is such a small aspect of that film.
It really is. But when we were talking about doing the fantasy movies, that was one that popped into my head. Is would you how could you remake that? And you can't.
No, I definitely wouldn't remake it. It stands fine the way it is.
Yes.
And this episode isn't specifically about that. We're just gonna reminisce. But I mean, that I would definitely make a fantasy film, even though I think the fantasy aspects, if you totaled up the minutes, is probably about 20 minutes.
Yep.
Because it's more of a World War II story, or World War I.
Spanish Civil War, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was. Yeah, it's some Spanish War.
I think it was the Spanish Civil War. Yeah,
Civil War. But what a wonderful, poignant piece, and all those fantasy sets are just brilliant. So,
well, I think you've hit upon part of what makes a good fantasy film is there's that basis of kind of the universal story of like a struggle of some kind where there's that realism that bases it. Like you've got to identify with these characters in a unrealistic setting.
well, the one theme that seems to come up on probably the favorites in the genre is always the hero's quest. That seems to be the really big thing, is the hero's quest, and that thing he has to do, but he's got to do all these other things along the way to get to that other thing,
and the roadblocks that he comes across, and
yeah,
I mean, because nothing ever goes smoothly.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and he's also, I like the hero who's slightly flawed or has a lot of obstacles to get past. He's not an ultimate warrior out of the gate.
Yeah.
And he's not even the best warrior. I mean, one of the other things we were talking about prior to podcasting was Amber, or the Chronicles of Amber. I'm bringing it up right now because it just popped into my head because you were talking about flawed characters. The lead character, Corwin of Amber, right from the beginning of the book, he's at a disadvantage because he has no memory. He's got amnesia.
Oh, man.
Right? And throughout the series, he acknowledges he's not the best swordsman out of his brothers. He's not the best user of the magics out of his brothers. He's not the best. Right, but he's still the hero,
and
right?
I love that.
And he overcomes all of these disabilities, for lack of a better way of putting it, to still become the superior of, or the king of Amber. I don't actually think he actually abdicates later, but that's beside the point.
Oh, true.
But you were talking about flawed heroes, and he's a really good example. And he's selfish, and he's arrogant, and he's really not that nice of a person. He's not a bad person, but he's very human, even though he's not human.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, flawed characters, and I love when they do put training sequences in there. They're not experts right away. Krull, when he seeks out the glaive as part of that first part of his quest, just to get that glaive, and he's not very good at it right well. Actually, it happens pretty fast, but they have their own glaive in Beastmaster, and he has to work with it a little bit before he gets really good with it.
Oh, for sure. You can't, it's I like the idea that this hero is being grown.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not instant heroes.
He's coming to be.
Yeah, it's part of their coming to age into that role.
And that's, it's sort of, the quest is sort of the second part of the story. The first part is always the becoming to go on the quest.
Yeah, usually the quest is there to get some certain item to overthrow that big evil. That seems to happen a lot. And I think that starts with Tolkien novels and has inspired most fantasy ever since.
I have to say, to a certain extent, you're right. There are exceptions, but as a rule, it's good versus evil, right? Or not really bad against really bad in some cases.
Yeah.
But
well, we get that from, I think a lot of it is like fairy tales. Fairy tales are where that starts, right? I mean, you have somebody, there is an evil person, and then the other good person has to come and vanquish them, or come help somebody else, or rescue something, or that's where that all starts. I think is where fairy tales kind of give us this idea of fantasy. But now we've kind of done a lot more work at there's more nuance to like your characters and more nuance to your villains.
For sure.
Yeah, no, and I think it's not always good versus evil, though, right? I mean, Beastmaster is a good example. The Beastmaster, he's not really a good guy.
Oh, no.
Right? He's just the lesser of two evils. Right?
Yeah, he's trying to help people at a certain point, but it sort of becomes, he realizes why he needs to. He doesn't really realize why at the beginning.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of self-serving in his motivation. I mean, he's trying to be a good guy, right? But he's not like Halo good guy, right?
True.
Like he's not good for the sake of being a good guy.
And that's the other trope. It's sort of, you have the other bit where there's a hero who simply falls into this quest.
Yeah.
He's not sent on it. It's not a mission that has to be done, but it happens, just circumstance puts him on this quest.
Yeah. Mad Mardigan from Willow is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Right? He's really reluctant to get involved at all.
Well, he just wants out of his cage.
Yeah.
That's his only thing.
Yeah, it just keeps getting sucked in deeper and deeper.
Yeah, exactly. Right,
Yeah.
and those characters are almost more fun.
Well, here's an interesting one. How about Dark Crystal? You know, such a wonderful, well-rounded fantasy world by Jim Henson's company and the Henson Creature Shop. I still think it's one of the most beautiful fantasy films ever, with no live actors. It's all puppets and animatronics. And god damn is this movie gorgeous. And it's not, I mean, yeah, there is a quest, but it is basically about the decline of two warring species to create something new. Nobody's really bad or good. I mean, it, almost like the good ones are almost too good and are bad for it, and the bad guys are...
It's about, I think...
They're not really... There's no real evil... good or evil in that movie.
It's the conflicting bit, like when you can get to a point where like the good people find their sense of morality kind of there's this black and white and it has to be this way. That's when good people can become very evil because they feel they're doing something bad in the service of something good and they're blind to it. So ultimate good is not good. And then you have like the evil guys they're simply being selfish. They're not being evil. Evil for evil's sake is not quite where they are at.
No, the Skeksis were corrupt. They weren't.
Yeah,
evil.
well, they were.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, they are two halves of a whole.
Yeah.
And when they're joined as a species to create something new and more enlightened by both sides of that coin.
So they're able to see both. See both the light and the dark. I'm going to refrain from saying good and evil because they weren't really. They were
No.
Right.
But how those two parts of humanity, how those two parts of humanity is like you think you're so good, you lose sight of it, you stop being good. And if you start being so selfish, you stop thinking of other people, you're not good either. So it's sort of about how to find where that sweet spot is, I think, of the gray areas. And it was, like you're saying, it's a beautiful film and all puppets, but yet so much emotion I felt in that film throughout that entire film.
Yeah.
What was sundered and undone shall be whole, the two made one.
And now the prophecy is fulfilled. We are again one.
I remember, being so enamored with it and crying a lot.
Oh,
as
it's
a
a
kid.
scary movie too at times.
It is, and you just reminded me of another Jim Henson film that should have been on my list of favorites. I completely forgot about Labyrinth.
Yeah,
which
I was heading there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you. I'm glad you didn't forget because
true.
I mean, it's got one of my all-time favorite performers in it.
Yes, God rest David Bowie.
Yeah, who I don't think they could have cast anybody better as the Goblin King.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Did you? The special features on the disc, they actually show what the original Goblin King was supposed to be, and then along comes Bowie, and they're like, "Well, I guess we don't need this big ass puppet anymore."
No.
Because it's fucking David Bowie.
Yes,
Exactly.
Just stick him in some tights, and away we go.
Yeah, and as like a young girl, I was like going, something about this, I like the Goblin King.
Yeah, it's such an enchanting film. Like, the music is spot on. The characters, it's got that Muppety quality that the kids are going to really like, but
but there's that
main
darkness
characters-
that fantasy needs is still present.
it's still there, yeah.
right? And I mean,
Darkness is important in fantasy.
it really is, and I think that. Admittedly, I'm biased because of my fondness for him, but Bowie captured the charisma so well. He was so charismatic as the Goblin King that if
Completely.
every bad guy had that kind of charisma,
I would not be a good person.
no, because you didn't dislike him, right?
No.
you questioned his motives, but you never disliked him.
Yeah, and
No,
it's weird, like,
yeah.
his motives, this also brings, like, I think this is the thing, like, Jim Henson and a lot of people who are creating, like, children's animation and everything today is they get it. They get that there's that sort of darkness to it, and, like, a lot of selfish reasons. People think they're doing things right, and they're not. And sort of, like, you have to show children where you think you're doing the right thing, but you got to think this through.
Yeah, I mean, the Goblin King was never evil. He never lies. I mean, he might not have the most noble of intentions.
No, but he thinks he's doing the right thing.
He'll manipulate situations to work them out to his benefit.
But he never lies during that movie.
No.
He always tells it as it is. I mean, it might not be the whole truth all at once, but everything he says out of his mouth is absolutely true.
And another great lesson from that movie, you need the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, the other thing that was great about that movie was we talked about the growth of the character, and the Jennifer Connelly's character grew throughout that. She was a selfish,
For sure.
petulant child at the beginning of that movie, and then by the end of the movie, she had learned things from every interaction she had. She learned forgiveness, she learned love, and she learned responsibility.
A lot more selflessness.
So there was that part of it too.
I think the only thing I ever found confusing about that film is Jennifer Connelly seemed a bit old for the immaturity she had at the beginning. The end made more sense.
Yeah, in a way, what Goblin King was putting her through, this challenge, was to make her a better person.
That's how she ultimately ends up
Ultimately, the protagonist isn't her, it's him.
there. Yeah.
Ultimately, yeah.
I mean, there's the layers in that movie are wonderful and subtle, but a good family movie. Now, I want to talk about another fun fantasy movie, because fantasy movies don't... I think they all should have a layer of fun to them to kind of break up that darkness. But this one doesn't get very dark at all. The Princess Bride.
Ah, yes.
Oh, I have a love-hate for that film.
Inconceivable.
How so?
It is a beautiful film, and it's a beautiful story, and it's so well told, and it's so much fun to watch. I'm just really tired of it. I've seen it so many times, and it's almost too revered.
Inconceivable.
It has its flaws. It's not a perfect film.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah. And I'm almost to the point where I'm like, you know what? If somebody says Princess Bride is the best movie ever again, I'm gonna pop them in the head.
Yeah, no, they're wrong.
Inconceivable. You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I really do enjoy the movie. It's very
wonderful.
charming and fun and wonderful. But, some of I think it's made better by its flaws.
Oh, yeah.
In some respects, because you're not supposed to take it too seriously. I don't think it's got the best actors in it or anything else, but it just kind of works for what it is,
Yeah. I don't know. I have to say Christopher Guest, that was the ultimate casting for that.
Yes.
The role.
Yeah.
Yes.
As the evil person, like especially the torture scene.
Oh no, he was excellent.
I loved him. He's like going, yes, so this is for posterity, so be honest. Just so evil, but I love this guy.
Yeah, and Billy Crystal was wonderful, and
Carol Kane,
Carrie Elwes was great. I mean, no, the cast was the right cast for the movie. I can't see anybody else in those roles.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've read the story, and I mean, it's true enough to the story that it is a great example of how a book can be translated to a film and still keep its integrity.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's just a little overworn for me now.
Yeah. Well, if you want to make a good double feature with Princess Bride, you watch that with Stardust. I think it's kind of a spiritual successor to it. It has that same sense of whimsy to it all. It's based on the Neil Gaiman story of the same name, although they kind of look very different. I think it's an overlooked fantasy film that sits in the same
Yeah, it never really
vibe.
took off.
Yeah, I think it sits in the same category. When I saw it,
it's
I'm
very
like,
much fantasy.
This is perfect to double up with.
I agree with you on that. I think that Stardust was too big for one movie. To be completely honest, I know it was a single story, but because Gaiman's writing is so rich and so detailed, it could have easily been two movies and could have been a lot more well-rounded.
Yeah. Well, another one he did that was based off of his story was actually he wrote it specifically for film was Mirror Mask, which was brilliantly done. Again, I think that was in the one you could double up with Labyrinth really well.
Oh, for sure, yes.
Yeah.
Like it's
I think I have actually
another good
Yeah.
fantasy quest movie, really charming and entertaining. But has enough of that darkness that a kid might, hide behind the couch, but there's nothing too
Nothing
terrible.
really give them nightmares, but enough that it will make them.
Well, and it's got that really interesting visual style which
Yes.
is
Dave McKeon.
Dave McKeon's art style.
Yeah.
Like, he was the director of the film, and he wanted to make a fantasy film that looked like his artwork.
Yeah, and
it does.
It does. It totally does. And I think that Dave McKeon and Guillermo del Toro are spiritual cousins.
Oh
yeah.
God, yeah.
Um,
Separated at birth.
Yes, like they have this really great sense of what is magical.
Yeah, I can't believe Dave McKeon hasn't been asked to do bigger projects
Me too.
Yeah, I don't know.
after Mirror Mask, and maybe it's because Mirror Mask didn't get a wide release like it deserved.
No,
Yeah.
and wasn't it a partnership with Henson Studios?
It was,
Yeah.
There's not a lot
Yeah.
of Henson in there because it was low budget. I mean, there looks like a ton
Yeah.
of CGI in that movie, but it's like 11 CG guys, so
Yeah.
it must have taken a long time to make that movie.
No, it really was a labor of love, and that may be
Yeah.
what maybe David McKean's not interested in doing any more films because of
Maybe it's because going through that process of he made the film he wanted to make.
Or maybe it might be like the trap I fell into with last week's episode where I didn't think my director was the right director for something because I didn't feel they had like the background. But maybe that's it. He's stuck in the fantasy thing and they're not giving him other opportunities to bring that magic to something else, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he needs to do another small thing, but yeah, part of me wishes I would have thought of that movie sooner. I probably would have say, hey, get Dave McKeon.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we were talking about Neil Gaiman, and I mean, it's not a movie, but it was that British miniseries Neverwhere, which
yes.
so good.
which was so
They
good.
are actually, I think they are thinking about remaking it as a feature film franchise.
Really?
Something. I'm not sure how, because it's such a big story. I'm
That's
not sure
what I'm
how
like-
they're going to handle it.
Yeah, how would you compress
If they're going
that?
to do it as a trilogy, maybe,
Yeah.
right, and fill out some of the stuff that got left out in the BBC series. I think it's BBC who did
Yeah,
the series.
BBC.
was,
But
yeah.
even then, like with the BBC, you can't. It's it would be hard to compress into like
Yeah.
a film.
I'd like to see
level.
something else done with
Even a
it because I
trilogy.
mean it was done on that low budget Doctor Who kind of budget, but it's so good. It's so well cast.
You get past the look because the story is so engaging.
Yeah.
and the actors were so well cast. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, it was wonderful. But yeah, if you want to talk about fantasy, I mean, urban fantasy is a very underutilized genre. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some great writers out there who do urban fairy tales and urban fantasy. There's Charles DeLint, who every chance I get to pick up one of his books.
Yeah, I quite like Jim
Nice.
Butcher.
Jim Butcher is excellent.
The Dresden Files specifically, I really enjoy those books. I've read them all the short stories, and there was a mediocre television series, but I'd like to see that done properly. I mean, that could be a major film franchise if given the chance.
A major film franchise, or maybe even one of these cable networks like HBO or Starz.
Oh, yeah.
where it could be made into a series with some decent backing.
Yeah, and he's done hardcore fantasy, and right now he's doing steampunk. So,
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
which in its way, it's its own kind of fantasy as well. It's an offshoot of fantasy, steampunk usually.
Yes, usually, yeah.
Yeah. It usually falls under that genre, but like it's a subgenre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any of his stuff would work quite well.
Certainly, yeah, it would work very, very well.
Yeah. What other literary pieces would you like to see as films? Because there's lots of fantasy in novels and comics.
Yeah, I haven't read a lot of fantasy, I will admit. Most of the fantasy stuff I've dealt with
I like
is on
watching
film.
fantasy. I don't like reading it that much. But
Yeah,
I like
most of my stuff is
I like
film.
urban fantasy as a genre, but just hardcore fantasy I have a tough time reading.
And see, I've been a big fan for as long as I can remember of fantasy novels. And I've mentioned it again. I've mentioned Amber, which is ultimately has got to be one of my all-time favorite series of books, and I reread it every 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But the Elric you mentioned,
Elric we mentioned before we started recording
Yeah.
this, and Michael Moorcock has a wonderful world with that the pale elf.
Yes.
There's actually a whole bunch of linked warriors throughout all of his fantasy films, and they're all kind of linked. I keep wanting to call him the Eternal Warrior, but I don't think that's correct. Mm-hmm. And they're all kind of linked through their lineage. But if you did an Elric with that look of the Brahm paintings, oh my god, that would be something to see.
yeah, it would have that ethereal Guillermo del Toro, Dave McKeon feel to it, right?
Well, when I think of it, I think of remember the antagonist from Hellboy 2.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like that starts looking a little bit like Elric to me, that character. So we're kind of getting there. I'm like, oh man, like that's
could do
close.
it.
Yeah,
I think Guillermo would be able to do it.
He would absolutely be able to do it for sure,
Yeah.
and bring that majesty and
The scope.
Yeah,
the
well,
scope
they keep wanting him for the Hobbit stuff, and he was supposed to do Lord of the Rings and
Yeah.
bowed out fairly early, and then he was attached to the Hobbit forever. I think
Yes.
he just couldn't wait any longer, and then Peter Jackson stepped in again. So, maybe Elric might be the better fit for him.
For sure.
get
Maybe,
a
yeah.
chance to do the big sprawling epic.
Yeah, and we do need a new fantasy franchise. I mean, with Hobbit being over, Harry Potter being over, Narnia series
Kind of
fading into
Limbo.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's not much out there for people who want to see a good fantasy film anymore.
And I'd like to see one, like you say, that all these fantasy ones, just great sprawling epics, and I get it, but I kind of want to see one that is a giant fantasy film, but maybe moves a little faster.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I'm going to see Warcraft this week as of this recording. It'll be out by the time people hear it, but I got some screening passes, so I'm interested to see that. I know nothing about the video game, but it looks... I mean, there's a ton of CG, but it looks really good. It looks like the orcs are the good guys, and it looks like something a little different, and I don't know if it'll stand up to the fans of the video game, but... since I have no preconceptions.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's Duncan Jones, going back to Bowie's son. If you've ever seen Moon, which, I mean, was
Loved Moon.
which is an amazing film.
One of the most amazing films with one person, basically.
It's essentially with one. You're exactly right. I mean, his casting choice really is part of that. I mean, Sam Rockwell.
You can just watch him forever.
Yeah, he owns the screen every time he's on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's just one of those actors.
Even as far back as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when I watched it, and I'm like, holy crap, that's Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, he's been around for a while. A lot of people don't realize that he's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And he doesn't work that much. I mean, I think he does the stuff he wants to do.
Yeah, he's picky, but in a good way.
In a very good way.
Yeah, it's always a treat when you get him.
It always is a treat when you get him. That's right.
Yeah, like when he does it, he goes for it. He goes hard, and it pays off.
Yeah, I mean, he was the best part of Charlotte's Angels.
Yes.
Sorry, but he
Oh,
was.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
He was-
I'm in complete agreement with that.
Yeah.
But we're talking fantasy.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are talking fantasy, and I want to talk about probably one of the most visually stunning fantasy films of the 80s that may have been a predecessor to something like Pan's Labyrinth is Legend.
Oh, Legend.
Just what a visually stunning movie. It's dark.
It is dark, and
But it has its humorous moments.
it has. It absolutely has its humorous moments.
Well, yeah, the tiny little dwarf guys. Those every time they were on screen, that's when you're like, oh, okay, I can take a breath because these guys are here now.
Yeah, it is, and you do need it.
Yes, and it's so distinctive. And we talk about music a lot on the show here, and so I'm going to tell a little story about when Jay and I were living together at this place in Tuxedo. I was coming home from work one day, and they were watching a movie. They just started watching a movie. I opened the door, and I hadn't even taken my shoes off. I went, "Oh, watching Legend, eh?" Because that music is so distinctive
For sure.
that you couldn't. It's so identifiable that if you've seen the movie once, you know the music.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that sits in your brain, and once you've seen it, and it just sings to that creative aspect in your brain. Like it's what a fantasy movie should be, and they did it in the 80s.
It's what
beautiful makeup.
It's an example of of a movie where they did everything right.
Yeah,
Like everything, the casting, the story, the music, the production, the storytelling of the story was all seamless. Like there's not a single moment in that movie where you're going, I wonder when to get to the next part. Like,
Yeah.
right. It's like you just don't want it to end. Right? It's one of those movies, and that's to me a good movie. Is if you don't want it to end,
yeah.
then they've
I
done the
could
job.
have stayed in that world for hours. Like
I
it's
loved it.
It's that kind of movie
With the unicorn, and
Yeah.
then like the part where there's only one of the unicorns, and just like I cried.
Yeah, it is the best of its genre and really sits up there with things like Labyrinth in a very different way. But it's timeless.
It's so visually.
I think they're talking about remaking it. And I'm like, man, I don't know how you can do this better. I just don't.
You can't. I mean, it still stands up. I'm sorry, but you cannot replace the Dark Overlord with...
No.
If it's not Tim Curry...
That is Tim Curry.
Yeah. And the makeup was fantastic, right? I mean, I don't think they could do a better job today.
I didn't know who it was until years afterwards. And then somebody said, that's Tim Curry. Like, Clue is my favorite movie.
I'd probably seen that movie 5-6 times before. I think it was Sam who told me it was Tim Curry. I had no idea.
Yeah, I love Tim Curry. I've loved him for years. And then I saw that movie, did not know it was him.
Yeah, before he got round.
Yes.
But, my God.
Well, under all that makeup, it doesn't matter.
I couldn't believe that was Tim Curry. It just was, wow. And that's just it. You believed in the Dark Overlord. You just didn't think of anything else.
Yeah, there wasn't... You weren't looking for an actor.
No.
That's why you didn't know who it was, because you were not looking for an actor.
Yeah.
You saw the Dark Overlord, and that's who you saw.
Yeah. And they did things with that makeup. Like, it was probably extremely uncomfortable and difficult.
Makeup and perspective.
But...
Because he was big.
He was giant.
That's something they would just CG now.
Yeah, and they would. And to the detriment of the film, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because having him realistic
there.
and just using that perspective to make Mia Sara look just miniature.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that both Tom Cruise and Mia Sara are both diminutive people, they're not very tall. And I don't think Tim Curry's that tall, but with his prosthetics, the prosthetic feet, that gave him that added height to really make that work.
And that's why the fawn looks so great too in Pan's Labyrinth. It's all practical.
Yeah.
And they did that whole hoofed horse leg on him that is unnatural for humans, but it probably was difficult to move around. But at the same time, man, does it pay off?
Yeah, if you can make that stuff work, it is so worth it.
It is, because it takes you into the world, because you're seeing it as real, because it is real, right? Whereas with CGI, no matter how good it is, you can usually tell that it's CGI.
Oh, yeah.
And it kicks you out of that fantasy, because you know it's not real. But when you have those practical effects like Pan's Labyrinth and Legend, that's a real living, breathing creature.
Yeah,
right?
like when you can do, if it's like a completely animated film, like Monsters, Inc., and it's like the hair on Sully, you're like, okay, I get that. Within that universe, that makes sense to me. But when you're trying to combine a real person with that sort of magical creature, it usually, that CGI falls flat. But if I look at a film and I'm like, I feels like I could just reach out and like touch that fur, and I'd feel fur, like a real thing. That just makes it so much more real. And it also makes it so much scarier. Like, as a kid, I remember knowing the stuff was real. Like in The Dark Crystal, knowing those things were there, that's more frightening to me.
Yeah, it's more. There's that tactile sense to it. Right? Even though that you knew they were puppets, or at least I knew they were puppets because I was a little bit older when it came out. You still got that sense that they were real, because they were, in the sense that they had dimension and mass, right? Whereas CGI, I mean, they're wholly created on
It's like air.
A computer screen. Now, that being said, I still love CGI. It has its purposes, and it can certainly add a lot to a film. But when it comes to fantasy, I want to see as much practical as I can.
Yeah, it just helps sells it. Krull, again, they had a big Cyclops in there, and the eye blinked and everything. It looked great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can go back even further to the Harryhausen stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
God, yeah, the Harryhausen stuff,
Right?
yeah.
I mean, when he was revolutionary in the way he created his creatures, I mean, it doesn't stand up anymore, let's be honest. I mean, they're still a lot of fun to watch.
I think it still looks neat. Like, there's a herky-jerkiness to that stop-motion style of his.
But it seems otherworldly enough because you know it's a different creature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, remember the first time I saw Sinbad? I actually saw a Sinbad movie in the theater. I can't remember which one. My memory's not that good, but I remember being so excited when I walked out of that movie.
He's fighting skeletons.
He's fighting skeletons, and you had the Cyclops. And as a kid, at 8 or 9 years old, that is fucking amazing, and I was literally vibrating like in that movie.
Yeah,
right?
that's why I like Clash of the Titans so much. I'm like, to see the Kraken rising from the water, like, oh god,
like all those arms, and then like it just keeps rising and rising and rising.
Demonic characters and gods.
Medusa.
As an adult, I appreciate it even more because you appreciate the effort that went into making that as real as possible, given the limitations that they had at the time.
Yeah,
right. So it's and that's why it still stands up. As adults, we see it and go, "Wow, that looks freaking great," considering
Well, I
Right.
was listening to something, and it's not fantasy, but it's horror. But American Werewolf in London versus American Werewolf in Paris. One of them stands up. It's not the newer one, because the newer one used CGI. The older one holds up because they use practical.
And I mean, to talk about that one a little bit, I remember seeing that. I remember I was 13 years old, and we had Super Channel, and it was on.
Super
And
Channel.
I wasn't supposed to watch movies like that. I was still too young. I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies. And I watched that sneakily in my bedroom.
Yep.
I had managed to sort of get things jury-rigged so I could watch it. And I got busted, but I just remember seeing that scene, and I was 13 years old, and I'll still never forget this. The scene where the werewolf knocks that guy's head off and it bounces off the hood of the car. It looked great at the time, and I started laughing, and that's how I got busted. I was laughing so hard because I was so shocked, right? It was either shriek or laugh.
And that was the thing, when you talk about mass, like that thud of a head...
Yeah.
Like, sometimes the sound, like the thud, and if it's practical enough where it looks like it's hit the right way, and then you add in the sound of like a thunk, like that can make everything, even like the sound of like a squishy sound can make me nauseous if it's done right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sound design is helps sells everything.
Yeah.
But bad CGI with good sound design can kind of help, but it still won't complete
Yeah,
it.
there's a
Practical
kind of a
with good sound design will make me throw up.
plastic sheen of CG that there's this gloss to it that, I mean, they're getting way better at it, and
With the exception of Wolverine
I think
movie.
there's a bit of a move away from it now.
I think we're seeing a organic mix.
Yeah.
I hate to use the term
Use it
organic.
more subtly.
Yeah, they're using
yeah.
a mix of practical and CG so that it works better. I mean, as much as I did not like the Avatar movie, I'm sorry to anybody who loves it.
Oh, no, I didn't like it either.
Nobody loves that movie. It's just a visually stunning movie to watch.
And that's where
Yeah.
I was going, is Cameron
Dances with Smurfs. That's what it is.
did a great job at it because you still kind of believe that they were real when all was said and done, right? Because it was so seamless and the CGI worked really well.
And the fact that the CGI looks exactly like the actors, that's what helps sell
yeah,
it.
he painted a really wonderful world with that.
He did. I have no interest in seeing the sequels. I probably will because I want to see
it's
it.
the
But
thing to do.
but I've seen Avatar once. I will.
It's like
likely
going to
never see it
Vegas. You
again
just feel you should.
because I admit it. I slept through the first hour and a half of that 3-hour movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great movie. It's just a really stunning movie. I don't think I've seen it since it came out either. And I don't
saw
really
it
need
once
to.
at a friend's house, and that's enough. Because I only want, and again, I only watched it because
Which-
I wanted to see how it looked.
Yeah, that raises
I
the
didn't
question:
even look at it.
How will three more sequels do when I think everybody kind of had enough of it already?
And it made the most money. Any sequel you will come out with after this, will just do worse. I think you can guarantee that they will all do worse.
Yeah, unless he gives us a really kick-ass story.
A
Puts us back.
really kick-ass story and keeps the runtime
Reasonable.
down to something bearable. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean, the Avengers movies and the Marvel movies, they get up to 2.5 hours, but you're so engaged in what's going on there that you don't notice that time passing.
Yeah, but I have to say, as like somebody who might need to pee, you got to put an intermission in. Did I tell you, when I was in Iceland, that's where I watched Mad Max Fury Road, was in Iceland. And they give you an intermission. And you can go up, you can go to the bathroom, and go for another run at the snack counter. It's more money, guys. An intermission will just help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If a movie exceeds 2 hours, there should be a short break.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, it was only 10 minutes. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you got a 3 hour, I mean, that's 2 movies, 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's 2 movies put together. That's crazy long. So, now, when I say the words dark gothic fantasy, whose name do you think of?
Well, I think of Bram Stoker when I say.
Okay, well, that wasn't where I was going, but
Oh, you meant director?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
Well, that's not. Well, you have to be a little more clear.
fine.
I know Guillermo I see as
Yeah,
gothic.
really, Guillermo's the one that comes to me.
Okay, well, there's one that is often forgot, but probably has more fantasy in his films than not, and that's Tim Burton.
Oh yes,
Oh, yes.
of course. I
course.
love. Yeah, well, how could I forget Tim Burton?
Yeah.
I'm mad at myself.
Well, I know how I forgot Tim Burton because I'm getting
mixed,
tired of him.
Yeah, with mixed results, I think. Really worked early in his career, bringing those dark fantasy tones into regular world with things like Edward Scissorhands and Beetlejuice. And,
The Addams Family, which I
Addams
watched
Family.
recently and is still great.
yeah.
And even Pee Wee Herman to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I would say that's a fantasy movie.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very different type of fantasy film, but it is unquestionably a fantasy film.
And also, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, one of the scariest things I remember seeing as a kid with Large and Marge.
Yeah.
That literally gave me nightmares.
Big Fish.
Big Fish.
Probably one of my favorites of Tim Burton because... and I think that was his passion project as well.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's probably the last Tim Burton film that was an original.
Yeah,
property.
and honestly, that probably was the last one I actually liked.
I'd have to agree with you on that one because
I
they
just
moved into things like
haven't-
Sweeney Todd and
I liked Sweeney Todd.
Yeah,
I did.
yeah.
I don't know if that was after or not, but
it was after. Yeah,
but lately, not so much. I detest Alice in Wonderland, and I have
See, I don't
zero
mind Alice in
interest in the
Wonderland.
sequel. It's an animated movie. For God's sakes, just leave it animated if you're just going to spend all that money to do giant fucking heads.
yeah.
See, but I love that. That made me
his
real
Charlie the
creeped
Chocolate
out.
Factory was very, very entertaining.
That was very good. Yeah.
But I'm finding that and I'm sorry, Tim, because I think you're a genius, but I don't know where you put it. Pull it out of the closet because you haven't done an original thing in years.
Yeah, Dark Shadows was not good.
No.
Oh,
That
Dark
was
Shadows was an
not good.
abomination.
Right. Stop going to the well of other properties and just be your creative self.
Yeah, he's not that great at other properties. I mean, look at the abomination that Planet of the Apes was.
Yeah.
Because we will.
Yeah.
Somewhere
We're getting
down the
there.
road.
I mean, I hate to pick on him, but because I mean, his early body of work is so
Unique.
so timeless and
And-
unique.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of sometimes he goes into other properties and he brings his own gothic viewpoint of it. But I loved his gothic stuff where it's gothic, but there's a hint of majesty and fantasy and whimsy to it. There's an undertone of it that's just more lovely.
Yeah, I mean, and his animated stuff like Corpse Bride and
Yeah.
Nightmare Before Christmas. Again, genius.
Ooh, and Frankenweenie's even pretty good too.
Frankenweenie, I mean, considering that's what basically got him started, absolutely. Right? It's just sad that for me to see somebody who's so talented relying on somebody else's writing when he's so creative on his own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to see him doing something with Edward Gorey's stuff. I would love to see the Gashly Crumb Tinies.
Yeah.
I would like to see something like that made into a film. Like if any property he's going to take, the Gashly Crumb Tinies are something that he would make wonderful.
Yeah, he'd make them real, and that's that. And I could get behind that. Yes.
Yeah. Now, there's a fantasy movie that I'm surprised you haven't brought up that we're both very fond of.
Yeah. My
Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
I know that one.
yes. I'm so sorry that I didn't, because it's so amazing.
Terry Gilliam's always fascinating to see his stuff.
It is. He's in there for me with Guillermo and Dave
Yep.
McKean in terms of
Yeah.
having this really great sense of fantasy when he does things and making you believe it.
Yeah.
It's like you believe. I mean, you consciously and logically, you know this is a fantasy story and it's not real, but you get so engaged in what he's doing with the characters and the story that you get lost in it, and that's what I want from a movie all the time.
Yeah,
I want-
Dr. Parnassus was like that too. Just
And it's part of that Python-esque type of deal. Like Monty Python, sure they're all sketches, but it feels like a universe to me. Like it's a universe of absurdity, and you're going to be in it for a bit.
But if you can sell that absurdity, if you can make us believe that absurdity, then you're in for a
wonderful.
hell of a ride.
Yes.
Hilarious.
Yeah, you are in very much for a ride, and I mean, Baron Munchausen is absolutely a great example of that. I didn't enjoy Dr. Parnassus quite so much.
Well, I think it had suffered from massive reworking, losing your lead actor.
Yes,
but
it's
I
like-
still think the movie works.
Yeah, it does. Like, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it, but it felt broken to a certain extent to me. right? Like
Yeah.
they did a really great job of recovering from.
And
losses
it's
he
going to
lost,
feel a bit broken, but I think that's mostly by circumstance.
Yes, and I don't blame Gilliam at all for that. And I really, really would have loved to see his Don Quixote movie.
It's coming. It was.
Is it still coming?
Yeah. Well, it died there for a while, and it sounds like it could be heading finally back to the cameras in its cast now. So it sounds like shooting might start by the end of the year.
Did he do medicals on all the actors this time? Because that's a reasonable request, Terry. Just if they balk at that, that's a problem. You need this information.
If it goes wrong this time, just give it up.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, as much as I like Johnny Depp, I hope that he is no longer part of the project.
I don't remember if he is or not, honestly.
Yeah. Just because right now, I mean, that poor guy needs a lift somewhere, but I don't know if this film is going to be it for him, because this is a passion piece. It's not going to get that wide audience that
I
Johnny
know
Depp
he was attached to it for quite some time, but I don't think he is anymore.
You never know, he might go back. I mean, he's
this is the kind of thing that he would have done in the past, because his body of work was very interesting, unique, and I think he's kind of gone mainstream, and the body of work's kind of suffered since then. The best things in the last few years from him is Pirates, which definitely fits into this conversation. So
it definitely does, and I'm going to say the first one was good. Actually, the first one was great. Second one was good. Third one lost me, and I haven't seen one since.
I love the third one because it's Fear and Loathing on the High Seas. Yeah. It's not pirates anymore. It's a Hunter S. Thompson novel with pirates.
See, and I hated that.
I fucking loved it.
hated it.
Well, I may give it another chance. I don't think I've made it all the way through. Now, I will be honest, and I'm sorry, Val, but sometimes you're hard to watch movies with. I may have enjoyed it a lot more if my wife hadn't been hating on it the whole time there, and I'm taking the enjoyment out of it for me, because I was starting to see it her way.
True.
Or the way she was seeing it. So,
but I'm sorry. In this instance, I felt she was correct, because there's something about it. I didn't feel like they just went somewhere stupid with it, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. The first movie was good. They kept going back and forth. I liked the Enchanted Pirates. I felt you didn't have to go back to that island so many times. I would have cut a portion of that movie out, but it was pretty decent. Yeah. But the magic of having the cursed coins, love that bit.
Yes.
It's great.
Yeah, no, it was extremely well put together, and I think the way I felt about the second one was that is like, let's go back to the well, because the first one was a complete story.
Yes.
Right? And when you have a complete story, you have to be very careful when you go back to that well to make sure that every story after remains a complete story. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they did that successfully with the second and third movies. Mm-hmm. Right? Between the two of them, they were a complete story. But when you have them as far apart as they were, you're relying on your audience to rewatch a movie that maybe they didn't love before going to see a third one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know that the fourth movie and this fifth movie, I believe, they're going to be complete stories. So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, sure. I think I saw the fourth, but I remember little to nothing about it.
Yeah, I think I saw the first two.
Like, I'm positive I saw it, but I couldn't tell you anything about what it was about.
Yeah, I know I didn't see it.
And that, to me, that's a mark of a bad fantasy film. If I can't tell you anything about it, then it didn't have anything to give me.
Yeah, Captain Jack was in it.
Yeah,
if I can mention characters and set pieces without giving you any plot...
Yeah.
That's not good.
Well, no, I mean, Pirates I love. I love that whole franchise. The fourth one was pretty sad. But I was thinking Never-Ending Story. I can barely remember the first one. I don't even know how many there are, but...
There's like 4?
Initially, when the movie ends and everybody makes that joke, it's like, oh, the Never-Ending Story ended. And then they just made more, and you're like, okay, you can end now.
Yeah.
TV series.
Yeah, I saw the first.
First one's quite wonderful.
And the first one is wonderful.
The first one is so horrifying as a kid.
It is a really dark movie, and it's definitely not for younger children. I mean, if you're under 10, you probably shouldn't be watching it.
Oh, that big wolf that's chasing him and destroying kingdoms is terrifying.
And then they kill the horse, and...
Artax in the swamp, I still cry. If I watch it again, I can't watch that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the dragon was... I mean, so well done, given the time frame that this movie was made. Again, when you look at when a movie's made, and if you can look at it and go, that still looks good, then it was really fucking good.
Mm-hmm. That's like a number of people on the top of their game doing that puppetry.
Yeah,
that's amazing. But
and these are people who are really interested in making a good film.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of it, there's like I think it's the Nothing.
Yes,
the nothing is what's coming through. Like how incredible as like an antagonist, a villain is just nothing.
Where I come from in the north, we used to have exquisite gourmet rocks. Only now, they're all gone.
I know how it happened.
I swear it wasn't me.
No, I think I know what it was. Tell us more.
Near my home, there used to be a beautiful lake. But then it was gone.
Did the lake dry up?
No, it just wasn't there anymore. Nothing was there anymore. Not even a dried up lake.
A hole?
A hole would be something. No, it was nothing. And it got bigger and bigger. First, there was no lake anymore, and then finally, no rocks.
If he keeps stuffing his face like that, soon there won't be any rocks here either.
Nighthawk, this could be serious. Rockbiter, what you have told us is also happening where I live in the West. A strange sort of nothing is destroying everything.
Yes, we Nighthawks live in the South, and it's there too.
So, it's not just in our part of Fantasia?
Maybe. It's already everywhere.
Well, think about the allegory that's there and how relevant even more relevant it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it was a commentary on people losing their imagination and relying too heavily on television and movies to entertain them instead of going to a book and using your imagination to visualize these characters and these creatures and all these wonderful things that somebody else has gone to the effort of putting down on paper for you so that you can use your own imagination to see them.
Yeah, and like creating
what the
a
nothing was, right?
Yeah, like it creates a world. Like the part of the idea is like somebody having that effort to put in that imagination is what makes these things live. And as long as people aren't doing that, they die.
Yeah, yeah. So it really is truly a great allegory that stands up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's ironic too, considering it was done in a movie, but
yeah, a movie about a book.
About a book that's about how movies are destroying books.
And now we're a podcast talking about movies that were remade from other movies, and then we're books, and
yeah, there were books that were remade from
the
books.
The circle
and then...
of destruction continues.
Yeah.
Oh my God, are we the nothing? Oh no!
Yeah, in a certain way, yes, we are.
But don't stop listening.
No.
I want to be the wolf. No, we're the wolf. We're not the nothing. I'm going to stand by that.
Fair enough. We're something. Animated movies. There's a lot of animated movies with fantasy themes, and the beauty about animation is
you can do anything.
There's really no budget. It costs what it costs.
Yeah. That brings up something that I was thinking about in preparation for this podcast. The Peter Jackson Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies, specifically Lord of the Rings, versus Ralph Bakshi's. I was thinking about this specifically because I hate the Lord of the Rings movies. I'm sorry. I mean, but
oh no, you're sitting on the right couch.
They are beautiful, and the characters are excellent,
but they're boring.
They're just too long. I'm sorry, Peter, but you could have cut some time out of them just to make them a little less drawn out. I mean, I loved them when I saw them, but I'll only be able to watch them once. Every time I've tried to watch them since,
I'll go down with what I've said at the very beginning. It's called an editing room. Use it. Just because you shot it doesn't mean it's gold.
Yeah. Well, the Ralph Bakshi movie, I mean, it goes through into the second novel.
It was intended as two movies.
Yeah, it was intended, and it moves.
It moves. It's still entertaining.
Yeah.
It still captures the story.
And
unfortunately,
it's very obvious Peter Jackson saw it.
very obvious that Peter Jackson saw it, and it captures all the key points of the books, but it makes it more watchable in the sense that you don't feel like you're. I mean, Peter wanted you to get engaged in the world and wanted you to be part of the world, but you know what? Parts of that world are boring, right? I mean, I get bored walking to the store. Why would I want to get involved in a movie where I'm walking?
Like, sincerely, we could have had a whole scene with, like, the dwarves doing their taxes, and it wouldn't have seemed out of place in a movie where they just put in everything.
Yeah, and again, I shouldn't say I hate them. I'm just not interested in seeing them again because they were so long. Due to that, I have not seen the Hobbit movies.
Yeah, don't.
Because it's shorter than any one of the Lord of the Rings books, and they still turned it into 3 films.
Well, I do love the Lord of the Rings movies. I do. That third one, meh. But I'm still a big fan of it. I love just looking at the world, so I'm actually a little more okay with just the walking. The Hobbit movies, it passes the point of pretentiousness at that point.
And that was my concern about it.
So long for such a short book.
There was only I could have watched the portion of the movie where they're in that community that's kind of on the water and it's cold out and Stephen Fry's like the magistrate and the other guy's like sort of, I think, is it Luke Evans who's in it? Mm-hmm. I could have watched a movie just about that place. I would have liked that. I would have been content.
Yeah, and that's why I do like the Hobbit movies, and again, they just give you lots to look at. And that kind of keeps me content through those slow bits.
See, well, they do once.
Yeah.
For me, they do once. But I'm not necessarily going to go back and watch it a second or third or fourth time because I know that I've already kind of seen it. And
if I want to see that, I'll go hike New Zealand. I'll go to New Zealand and I'll hike New Zealand. If I want to watch the scenery, I'll watch New Zealand. It's the same problem I had with The English Patient. The English Patient is just long and arduous and it's just a pain to get through. But it's beautiful to look at. But if I want to see a large portion of film being dedicated to beautiful outdoorsy things, I'll watch, the Discovery Channel for a couple hours. I'm not going to watch a film. I don't mind bits where people are going from A to B if it's part of the film and that's what has to happen. But if all the film is going from A to B with nothing happening at A, much at A or much at B, I'm going to get very unhappy.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate cinematography and I appreciate the beauty of some of these shots. But when I watch a movie, especially a fantasy movie, I want to be entertained. I need stuff to happen fairly quickly before I start to disengage. Right. And that was my issue with Lord of the Rings. I mean, if they condensed it, even taking like 15, 20 minutes out, I probably would have enjoyed them a little bit more. You don't have to butcher it. I don't, because they are whole stories, but they just weren't compact. And I talked about this before. Is how fantasy movies can be compact. They don't have to be these big sprawling. Epics.
Yeah, I feel that way with the last Harry Potters.
There's a more good example.
They were so compact before, and complete and entertaining watches in themselves, and then you split. Was it Deathly Hallows?
Deathly Hallows is in 2.
That gets split up, and the first part of that is so fucking boring.
Yeah.
So slow.
I'm aware it's a long book. I think I got the feeling the entire time watching it was people like, oh my God, we're almost at the end. I don't want to be at the end. Oh no, how do we stop it from being at the end? We just keep going.
Yeah.
Like we need to draw it out. When you're having a good night out and you're like, let's have this final shot of tequila.
Maybe it was
don't do it.
Too long for one movie, but not quite long enough for 2.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more of this.
That happens a lot.
With them splitting these books into 2 movies, the final book into 2 movies. We saw it with the Hunger Games.
It's cash grab.
We saw it with the Twilight series that they made 4 movies out of 3 books. And the
They made 4 movies out of 3 books and very little writing.
Yeah, so and we're seeing more and more of that where it's like, the story doesn't warrant a 4th movie. Just freaking work with it and make the movie.
It frustrates, I think, most audience goers to have to split up their time for one story.
Exactly. I mean,
how can you keep interest
And-
over 6 months to a year?
well, especially when the first movie of all of these, without exception, the first movie of the final movies is always really boring.
Oh yeah.
Always.
It's all
Because
set
it's
up.
all set up stuff, right? Nothing really truly interesting happens. So you're like, wow, that really sucked. I don't even know if I want to see the second,
Yeah.
the other half of it.
You know what it is? Like, you know when you watch TV shows, they're like, previously on Gossip Girl, and they show those bits in between, like right before? That's what that first movie is. Previously on The Hunger Games, and then they give you a movie.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. There's a lot of backstory that's. I mean, it's important to the story, but it doesn't need to be a movie on its own.
Well, and you are
Or tie up
segregating
an
your audience. You got to assume that this could be somebody's first time seeing this franchise, and sometimes that happens. You know, not everybody was around to see Empire that Strikes Back or Star Wars, and then their first one was Empire Strikes Back. But it's, for the most part, a complete film.
Yeah, you can watch
it. You
it.
don't need to have seen Star Wars to really understand Empire.
Oh yeah.
That's very true.
So, part of me feels like that's a mistake Marvel's making. As much as I loved Civil War, it does kind of require you to have seen a bunch of other movies. And it's the first one that they did do that with. And I think I know what they're trying to do. They are turning the cinema goers into comic book readers, essentially.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of comics. But I don't know if you can get away with that as much at the
Well, they're
movies.
turning the movies into a series.
Mm-hmm.
Like I found with Marvel, it happens a lot where I'll be watching a movie and partway through I'll be sitting there going, oh, I'm just watching a setup for another movie. I'm not watching a movie. I'm just watching them put something together so that I have to come back.
I mean, usually it's that stuff is in the post-credit scene, but when you watch something like Civil War, you kind of needed to see the post-credit scene of Ant-Man. You needed to see Ant-Man just to know who he was, because he never appeared anywhere else. And the more you watch it, the more it kind of helps that the inciting incident is the first Avengers movie. Then they reference Winter Soldier, and I mean, you need to
and then
watch
Age of Ultron, and
Yeah.
they reference a lot of it. And I mean, for this particular story and the way the story was told, it was critical.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because the whole motivation behind that Registration Act was the events of.
But that's dangerous waters to tread.
Was
'Cause
Tony
you're-
Stark doing something stupid again?
And yeah,
That was that whole thing.
Chances are that audience probably has seen most of them, but you can never assume that. So,
No.
Yeah.
that movie, if you had not seen any of those other movies, probably makes no sense to you whatsoever. Now, bringing it back to animated, we got sidetracked on Lord of the Rings, and that segued into another conversation. But there's-
LOTR took us on another arduous journey, strangely enough.
How ironic. So there's tons of animated fantasy films through Disney. Sam and I are big Bakshi fans, and there's certainly more of that.
There's certainly more of that, yes.
So let's get into that. My personal favorite was Wizards from Ralph Bakshi's studio.
I can't even argue with you on that one. I like all of Bakshi's stuff.
It's kooky, but still has that Tolkien-esque quest thing.
It
And,
totally does, and the characters were so much fun.
yeah.
It's got that adult sense of humor that Bakshi brings to everything, without moving into Fritz the Cat territory.
Yeah, it's not as adult as Bakshi gets, but still has that adultness to it.
Yes, it's
Fritz the
definitely
Cat.
a cartoon for mature people.
I'd say most of
Yeah.
that. Lord of the Rings is probably his most friendly.
Yeah,
of
it is his most
animation.
family-friendly one, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that one.
Fire and Ice is really amazing, too.
It's
Based
beautiful.
on the-
Definitely not family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely not, but based on the Frazetta paintings
Yes, yeah.
and characters, and really, really awesome.
It was. Now I can't remember if he rotoscoped that one like he did Lord of the Rings. I know that he.
That was, I think a lot
Wasn't
of that
there?
was rotoed.
I think so. Yeah, because didn't we we did this one in Popcorn Lobby? Did we not? Fire and Ice. That was the only time I saw it.
Oh yeah, we probably did talk a little bit about that in a video pod thing that
Yeah.
I don't know if it still exists out there. I don't know if it ever existed out there. They got
I think we
recorded.
streamed live once, and that was it.
Yeah.
No, but I know that Bakshi was sort of the developer of rotoscoping almost. He was one of the first to sort of make real use of it.
Yeah.
Because it kept his production costs down. It made the animation costs much lower
Yeah, well, I was always
But it's also very hard.
Yeah, before
Yes.
I knew what the term was, I was always struck by how those characters moved in those movies.
Yeah.
Because no animation did that before.
No.
That wasn't like Disney that did that full movement. But they weren't rotoscoping, they were just that good.
They were just that good, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I being the Bakshi fan that I am, I've done a lot of reading about his sort of career and stuff like that. And one of the things that he did do, especially for Lord of the Rings, was, like I said, he went to the rotoscoping because it was cheaper to hire actors to act out the scenes and then draw over the film than it was to animate from whole cloth.
Yeah, there are definitely some scenes that look very much filmed.
Yes.
The animation's pretty quick. You can tell it's actors rather than animation. And other scenes where they've done really wonderful animation over top of that smooth flow of an actual person.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the way that they move, it's not jerky. It's that very much. Yeah, it's some people. The way people move, it doesn't look incomplete in a way.
Yeah, I mean, your eye usually fills in those missing steps when you're watching an animated feature, and I think that may be why the rotoscope looks so interesting, is because you don't have to fill in the blanks, right? It just automatically, because you're seeing it. So it looks it's very visually interesting to watch the Bakshi films that he did do the rotoscoping on.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure. So let's talk some of the Disney movies. There were definitely a lot of those as well that were fantasy films. The not so fondly remembered Black Cauldron,
Which is unfortunate because it was genius.
It sits in there, yeah.
Yeah, it is. I watched it not that long ago because it's one of my. It's on my list of favorites.
See,
I
and
think
that's
it's
what I
one of
need
the
to
more
watch.
visually different ones as well.
It was.
It stands out visually amongst their other films at the time.
It was, and it was really dark for a Disney film.
Yeah, very
I
dark.
mean, it was certainly definitely for my generation of a viewer, actually, because I was at the right age to still be interested in Disney films, but mature enough to want something different.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't want a fairy tale like the ones like Cinderella or
Snow White.
I wanted something that
Sleeping
was a little
Beauty.
more from my age.
Oh, yeah.
and it was there.
Yeah.
Right? So I really enjoyed it.
It was certainly bold for its time. For Disney, what Disney was usually doing.
Oh,
it
for
wasn't
sure.
the Disney princess trope of the time.
Yeah, and I think at that time, a lot of animation were like, well, if it's animated, it's for kids. And they hadn't really, it was starting to get to that point where people were like, animation can be for adults too.
And I'm going back to Bakshi. I mean, he's almost solely responsible for that.
Adults like to watch animated stuff. It's just the story has to be for us too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantasy does seem to be their big theme over there, though, and continues to be with things like Frozen.
Mm-hmm.
But, we had Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, and
Sword in the Stone.
Yes.
Sword in the Stone is
With
good.
one of the best wizard fights ever.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't see that as one of the best ones. It's beautifully animated, but that wizard's battle is something else.
With
really
Mad
is.
Madam Mim. I loved her.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is epic, and it does stand out as being one of the more creative. I don't know if it's one of the best, but it's definitely one of the more creative and a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and the way Victory is got is just so inventive. I remember thinking at the time, like, holy crap, that's amazing.
And it was. So we can also talk about Pete's Dragon, which is being remade.
That's
Yes,
true, yeah.
It looks like a much darker tone, too.
I haven't seen anything for it yet.
Yeah.
So.
No,
I've
it's-
seen a
it's-
trailer.
And
yeah, I haven't
it's
seen-
Disney, right?
Disney's doing it. It's because it's their property.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I am a little bit older than the other people in this room, and I did see Pete's Dragon in the theater.
I might have, actually.
So I don't know. I can't remember how old I was.
No, I
when
definitely
saw
saw that on television.
Yeah, but yeah, it was. I remember it being a child and being blown away because it was one of the first times where you saw an animated character on the screen with a person, right? Which was really, really a lot fascinating to me as a young person.
That might have been the first one for me as well. I may have seen Bedknobs and Broomsticks before that, but
Mary Poppins has it.
yeah, I don't know if I've ever
There's
seen
a
Mary
small
Poppins
portion of
all the
Mary
way
Poppins.
through, but yeah, there is, yeah.
Yeah,
Where they
Pete's
did
Dragon
that.
was the first one that I remember
That
seeing.
most of the story was
Well, isn't
that.
there a Fred Astaire movie with animation?
There could have been, yes. And there was also, wasn't there something with, I want to say Bugs Bunny and Fred Astaire.
Well, there's a bunny in it, yeah. That's
Yeah.
the same one I'm thinking of. I just don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, but-
and somebody can write in and let us know.
Yeah, please do. But yeah, Pete's Dragon was my first experience with that, for sure. Because I think I was just a little bit too young for Mary Poppins and Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Or maybe too old for Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I can't remember. But
Yeah, no, Bedknobs and Broomsticks was Mary Poppins era. So it was before Pete's Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one I saw first either. I actually don't remember too much about Pete's Dragon anymore. I really don't.
Well, it's if you look, it's weird. I've seen parts of it again, and Pete's Dragon is not as happy as I remember it. Like, I mean,
No, it's a
these
sad
people,
story.
Yeah, these people say they own Pete, like they bought Pete. And like his dragon Elliot is the one who kind of helps him get out of that, or helps him like live his life. And I'm like going, that's child slavery is in this movie.
Disney doesn't shy away from that dark territory by any stretch.
No, I mean, Bambi's a classic example.
But I
of-
hadn't realized it at the time of Pete's Dragon. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a dragon?
Yeah. As we said, darkness is inherent and part of fantasy films.
Yeah, you need it in order for the light to shine through, right? For it to successfully resolve into a happy ending, you need darkness.
Yeah.
Right.
You need
Now,
to feel that
more
relief.
modern ones. DreamWorks Animation specifically has done quite a few fantasy movie animated films and had great success with Shrek.
Yes.
And more recently, How to Train Your Dragon.
Oh, love that movie. Love the second one is okay, but I love the first one.
And the TV stuff, too, for How to Train Your Dragon. Like, I have seen the 2 movies and all the animated stuff that is now, I think the last couple have been Netflix exclusives. And it just stays awesome all the time. It's just so good.
Yeah, they are
Such a rich world.
They've done a really good job of creating that world, and making it something they can continue to go back to. That's the important thing. If you want a franchise, you have to make it so that you can continue to go back to it and still be interesting.
Yeah, and again, that's the whole. It boils down to the one point where you don't need to make a movie about this character's entire life. It could be one of their adventures.
Well, in the regards of How to Train Your Dragon, it really is his entire life. We're watching those guys grow up, those kids grow up into the new leaders of that village. And that's probably where it's going to end, when they're finally grown up and married, and as soon as they're having kids. That's time to put it to bed, I think.
Yeah.
Which, might be where that third movie goes.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, they might be doing the proper trilogy where they're like, oh no, we're doing 3, and we're not splitting it into 2 movies.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, well, and that's the only trend that we're seeing with novels that have been turned into movies, at least in as far
Yeah,
as
but I
can
mean,
tell,
when you're talking cash grab, somebody might find a new way to make a cash grab.
Oh, well, it's everything's cyclic right now. It's comic book movies and YA novels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Or bad porn.
Oh, porn parodies will never go out of style.
No, I meant 50 Shades of Grey. They're doing those ones.
Oh, that was just a bad movie. I don't think anybody... They're actually doing more?
Yeah, they're committed to doing the trilogy.
They're filming the second one
There's
now.
3 books?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck me.
I don't know. I think
how do I get that budget money? Like, how is this even happening?
First, you write really shitty Twilight fanfiction and pretend it's BDSM and tell people fuck all about it.
Wait a minute. We kind of do that every week.
We could write a better book than that book.
Every other week we're recreating a movie, and I think we're better than that.
We are better writers.
Yeah.
We are better writers than E.L. James. We are. We just are.
Jesus.
And apparently less bitchy too.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm offended by those books on so many levels. I can't even tell you how many levels.
Well, yeah, I'm offended by bad
It's
writing.
an infinite plane
it's
now.
Certainly not the idea behind it, but Jesus. Like, why we keep making movies out of people from novels from people who can barely write their own names? Because she's not the only one.
And see, this is when we were talking before, I was asking you guys about what graphic novels you know of that would be great and like fertile ground for like fantasy films, because there's got to be these characters that are really good and are already there that could be made into a movie.
Well, there are. I mean, there certainly are. I mean, we've seen attempts, and unfortunately, they've been mediocre to bad at best. Cull is a great example. There was a germ of a great movie there. I mean, I even bought the casting. I enjoyed the casting.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Kevin Sorbo just doesn't seem to want to get out of that cheesy role. But yeah, everything was kind of there in conception. It just
But execution was
poor.
Yeah, it was
like
poor.
it fell into that. Let's just go kooky with it, and no.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have to treat that material with at least some seriousness.
And know the audience who's interested in it.
Yeah.
Don't make a PG-13 movie and hope that teenagers are going to come in and like it like they did with the second Conan movie.
Well, and that's just it. Like, you come out with the gate with something like Conan the Barbarian, and then you do what you did in Destroyer and entirely lose your audience.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can't assume you're going to attract a very different audience, because all you wound up doing was killing the franchise. And then you go do another Robert E. Howard thing and do the same thing, not appealing to that R rating that worked the first time.
Yeah,
it baffled me.
Yeah, some people need to be fired.
Yeah.
Really, the people who make those decisions need to be fired.
Yeah, I think it's like they don't quite understand what their thing is. Like, well, if we make it like this lower rating, we get just a bigger audience. I'm like, no. How you get a bigger audience is the people who are hardcore about it, telling people they know about it, like bringing those people in. You get your audience to grow your audience. You don't grow your audience by making it stupider. You make it better, and people will bring everybody into those theaters.
I mean, a classic example was the Deadpool movie, right? I mean,
Be true to the material.
Yeah, it's proved that an R-rated movie can make money.
And I brought people to that place who hadn't been in a theater in years.
Yeah.
And they went to see that movie.
An untested character, I guess they did it poorly once, but essentially an untested property, and it's the highest grossing R-rated film of all time, just out of the gate. It's not a sequel. That means it did better than Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. Like, there's money there, and there used to be money there.
Yeah, I mean, people still go see R-rated movies, especially when you consider, and this is something that I just wanted to bring up when I was thinking about this last night in preparation for this podcast, is when you look at when the fantasy movies sort of, like the sword and sorcerer movies specifically, started to... You sort of see one every couple months because everybody was jumping on that bandwagon.
Oh, yeah, a lot of direct-to-video things like Atar the Fighting Eagle and Yor, Hunter from the Future, like
and the gore
stuff we're not even really getting into yet.
Yeah, the gore novels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But part of that was largely due to the fact that Dungeons and Dragons was also starting to permeate geek culture.
Yeah.
Right? Initially. I mean, now Dungeons and Dragons kind of spans just about everybody. But... those people who were young then are your audience now.
Yeah.
And they're the audience that has money to spend on it.
True.
Right? Because they're in their late 30s to late 40s. Right? So their kids are starting to grow up and move out of the house. They're still interested in this stuff. I mean, I still have friends from high school on my Facebook who are still playing D&D.
Nice.
Right? I mean, I'm not, but then...
Well, when you think of what that next franchise is... D&D seems to be the right place. They've made a couple of really dumbass movies out of D&D.
I remember some terrible ones.
And it's baffling how they can get it so wrong. Because it's there. It's just sitting there for you. Like
It's because the people who make the movies don't play the game.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the game by any stretch, but boy, the guys who play or read the books based off of it, like the Dritch novels... God, I mean, they have such passion for it. Like, it's
and I think they're not listening. The people who make decisions aren't listening to the people who know about it.
Yeah,
like, they're not listening to the people who could write it properly.
When they've already been written properly. I mean, R.A. Salvatore has written a number of books for the Dungeons and Dragons universe that are fantastic and stand out separate from the universe as novels. And really well written fantasy.
They are regarded as some of the best fantasy novels.
Regardless of the fact they're part of that Dungeons and Dragons universe. So you have source material that is already compiled and written for you, right? You just need to take somebody who has a passion and love for it to direct it and script write it.
Yeah. Instead, we get somebody, something from somebody who's never played the game, never bothered to play the game, well, let's do a magical crystal that looks like a 20-sided die or some
Yeah.
bullshit like that. Like, I don't even remember that movie. It's so fucking terrible.
Yeah, or you'll get ones where they're like, okay, we'll do Dungeons and Dragons, but it's like it's somehow connected to our world, and there's like, you know, different parallel universes. Like, they don't think
No.
about what it
That
should be.
That canon has been done well.
And that's a hard thing to do because a lot of the time it comes off terribly.
On film, absolutely, because nobody takes the time to do it right. There's a series by a writer named Joel Rosenberg. It's called the Guardians of the Flame series, and it starts exactly that. They're Dungeons and Dragons players who accidentally get drawn in. Well, actually, they get deliberately drawn into a parallel universe, right? Where it's a Dungeons and Dragons type world.
That was the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon,
Well, it was.
which was great.
Yeah, which was great, but I mean, so little takes place in the real world, right? But part of the story is how they impact this world with their modern knowledge, with their knowledge from Earth. So they learn how to do things like gunpowder and build water mills and stuff like that, things that didn't exist in this world. So it's really well handled, and it can be done that way. But the key thing, and this is doesn't matter if it's fantasy or mystery or a thriller or whatever the case may be. If you're taking a book and you're turning it into a film, you need to take the time to read the fucking book,
Yes.
right? And make sure you understand what the important parts of the book are before you put a pen to paper to write the script.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Bottom line. I mean, as with any translation from book to film, you're going to lose some things. It's inevitable, because there's the
Books,
mediums are too
you
different.
can't do page per page, and there's stuff in books where it's an idea and a concept, and you're not going to be able to just have that idea and concept in film. You have to visually represent it.
Yeah. And if you read the book and you're the scriptwriter and you didn't like the book, quit. Say, I can't write this script because I didn't like the book. If you don't love the book, you should not be screenwriting it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a purist. I love my books. I love books. But,
true.
Right, and it always saddens me when I see a screenwriter hack it up because he didn't get it or she didn't get it. Right?
Or even a screenwriter that just seems to have this hubris where they're like, oh, this book is trash. I shall make it art. And you're like, no, dude,
And
we don't
there is
get
some
it.
of that, right? Certainly there's some of that. I mean, we've seen it well done.
I hate that.
Yeah, we've seen it very well done. I mean, I hate to say it, but the Twilight movies did a great job of representing the books. Because I did read them, because I'll read anything. Hunger Games, again, did a great job of representing the books.
See, yeah, that's more likely a book I would read.
Yeah. Divergent I have not read, but from people I've spoken to, they, again, did a great job of representing the books. Right?
What about Maze Runner?
Maze Runner?
I quite like that first movie. So.
Yeah, and I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody who's actually read the books for that. But those are all really great examples of producers and directors and screenwriters who made a conscious decision to be true to the source material as much as they could, given their medium.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're always going to have somebody else's interpretation in there, but they did a great job.
Yeah.
But I think you also kind of touched on the point, maybe these people had read it and liked it and maybe thought, hey, if we're going to do this, let's freaking do this.
Yes. We want to make sure that the way we envision things is the way we think everybody else has envisioned them after reading them as well. A good example of poorly done not once but twice is the Mortal Instruments book series.
Oh, that TV series that's on Netflix right now?
Yes.
Yeah, but they did movies.
There was one. There were two?
No, there's one
I
movie.
thought there was just one.
One movie,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And it did so poorly that the rest of the movies were just like, no, we're not doing this.
I had it bookmarked on Netflix, but maybe I'll yank it off because if you're telling me it's that bad.
Yeah, I mean, some people will tell you that it gets better. I watched the first 2 episodes and I cannot do it. I could not watch it.
Right.
There were just too many changes for me, and it was really poorly done. Like it felt low budget, and you can't go low budget on something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Which they should have learned from the failure of the movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can't. If you're going to do fantasy, that's the whole thing. Like, you have to budget for some of the magical stuff you're going to have to do. You can't just expect to be like, oh, we'll just imply that this is happening. No.
Yeah, so there are examples where somebody missed the point the first time they made a mistake and went and made this essentially the same mistake twice.
That's a shame.
And there's TV series out there right now that prove that you can do fantasy well and you can do magic well. I mean, we haven't touched base on Game of Thrones at all because it's not a movie.
Yeah,
but
it's a series.
But you can do it, yeah.
You can do it. I mean, it's got to be one of the most spectacularly done fantasy projects that's ever been put on film. I mean, it's comparable to the Lord of the Rings series in terms of scope and visually stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really visually stunning stuff.
And with that one too, I think that's not a series of books that you would put into like a movie, because there's a lot to put in. Like, I know with Game of Thrones, I get like I'm a bit behind, and I tried watching the most recent series, and I'm lost. Because there's some characters I'm not familiar with. There's like whole other arcs that are
you gotta have to stay committed to a show like that. I think there's so much going on in a show like that.
There is, and there are a lot of characters, because characters come and then they're gone.
And then there's a long game to it, like a super long game that you can see sort of in bits coming together, and you're like, this is going to be important later. I know this is going to be important later.
Yeah, I mean, it is designed. It was written to be epic. It is filmed to be epic. And I've heard something somewhere that there's been 473 key characters killed.
Oh yeah!
Wow!
Right. So you just imagine how many characters there are. Like that's
a big world.
That's a big world, but it works because they have time to tell it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a really good example of how fantasy can be done really well. And magic, that series, The Magicians. I don't know if anyone's seen.
I've seen part of it. I want to see more of it.
I've seen one episode because I haven't had a chance to sort of sit down and go back and get caught up.
That's something you kind of feel you have to binge watch a few to get.
Yeah,
I'm completely unfamiliar with this.
Spectacular. It's just really, really well done. So it's one of those shows that I'm like, I have to see more of this. I just haven't had a chance to yet. Mm-hmm. And that's what good fantasy should be. It's like, I have to see more of this. Mm-hmm. Right? I want to see more of this. Right? That's what filmmakers need to do, is create that type of feeling on film to say, I need to see more of this. To go back to Trish's point, you don't need to see the whole life all in one film. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't need to tell the whole story all in one film. You tell one complete story within the ongoing story of a character. Mm-hmm. Works so much better. I mean, novelists have been doing it for years. Robert E. Howard wrote Conan books as single stories. Mm-hmm. Right? Same with the John Carter Marr stuff. They were single stories. It wasn't this long, sprawling series of books that led you to a final destination. Each story was a story in and of itself. And that's what makes fantasy work.
Yeah.
Right? They get you engaged, and they make you want to see that character again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we didn't get a ton of that in like something like Indiana Jones.
No.
It was just, here's the next adventure. Here's the next adventure.
Yeah.
And that's a great example.
That's perfect.
The Alan Quartermain stuff was another good example of great intent. Execution, again, maybe not so good. I mean, these are not fantasy novels, but they are adventure stories. And that's what a fantasy novel is it's an adventure story told in a different place.
And if you give a great character, you're like, I had a great time with this character. Like, you think of them as a person or a creature or somebody you want to spend time with. And so you're like, oh, I want to go on another adventure with this character.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Indiana Jones was a good example of everybody is still excited that Harrison Ford's coming back to play Indy again. Right.
Now it just makes me sad.
It does, but it doesn't, because I would like to see a little redemption from
Skull,
from the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel that's why he's coming back. He's like, I can't die with that as the last Indiana Jones movie.
I'm kind of hoping that, and I'm sure this isn't their intent, but he's getting to the point he just can't really do that kind of role anymore. Like, he looks like a granddad. So, like, if he was telling his story to kids or something as a narration plot point or something,
his younger self,
and this is the clever way where you can recast that part and keep that franchise going with the new actor, and I mean, that's going to be tricky in and of itself, because Harrison Ford is so distinctive to that character. Like, recasting that character is going to be difficult.
I mean,
Sean
Patrick Flannery played him at one point, and that was it.
They did a capable job of recasting on that young Indiana Jones TV series, so it shows it can be done.
It can be done, and River Phoenix was very well cast.
Oh, he was greatly cast in that.
Yeah, so it can be done, and this could be the opportunity to hand passing the torch without having to go into that remake territory, because I never want to do that on my show, is do Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark again. No, I don't want to do that, so don't make me.
We will come and find you if you make us do this.
Yeah, you're already treading thin water with Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
but it's not a different story. It's not a remake.
I hope not. It certainly looks like it by that trailer, which makes me angry.
But it's not a remake.
It's the most hated trailer on the internet is because it's looking like they're just...
The trailer doesn't look bad, but then again, I mean, that director, getting this a little off topic, but that director doesn't have a history of making good trailers. But something like Spy,
good movies.
But Spy was great. So, but
Spy didn't have a strong trailer, but Spy was amazing.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, so that gives me some hope about Ghostbusters, honestly, because he makes good movies,
really good movies.
Yeah,
and maybe that's why he doesn't make good trailers. It's like, I'm not going to show you all the good stuff in the movie.
Yeah, maybe that's
which is what they should be doing. It's like, I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're showing you a trailer, and you're like, I've seen all the best parts.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, have you ever been to a movie and you've seen the trailer, like the trailer looks amazing, and you go and you're like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah,
this is awful. I feel terrible.
Right. And where's that part that was in the trailer? They show you stuff in the trailer that didn't even make it into the movie, and then you're like, but that's the part I wanted to see. I wanted to see what led up to that part.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I've been angry in theaters because I came to see a movie and I'm like, I was promised something a lot better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, it happens, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah.
What good trailer makers do is they get you drawn in, right?
Yeah. Well, you were asking about comic books that I'd like to see made as fantasies. They tend to adapt material. Like Conan's probably the biggest property in comics as a fantasy character. But there's some new ones that are happening right now, and I think the one that stands out most in my mind is a book called Birthright.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it's about this family who loses their son on a family trip. And the son is taken to this fantasy world.
Oh, nice.
And, I mean, you're the family's dealing with the trauma of losing their son over years. Like,
wow.
Well, over a shorter period of time. Like this, for the kid, he's gone years and years and years.
He's an adult
and he
now.
comes back as an adult. For them, it's only been a couple of years. They're still dealing with that trauma. And here comes this big, burly, barbarian-looking dude saying that he's their kid.
Oh, wow.
And with this memories of this new world, and he's got more experience living in a different world than the one he came from, and everybody thinks he's crazy. He's arrested, the whole bit, and he recounts tales of him being this big hero over there. Meanwhile, that world is starting to leach into the real world.
Oh my!
And his allies are coming back, and he's actually possessed by his biggest villain in that world. It is an incredible story, really engaging story. I highly recommend seeking it out.
I would like to see that.
I'm not sure if you could do it. Would make either a good television series where you can spend more time with it, and you can have that poignancy with the family that's being torn apart by this tragedy, and then this realization that maybe this guy is telling the truth. Like, there's all sorts of great stories to tell here.
Wow.
And it would still work as a movie as well, but I think it would work better as a television series, and you could do it on a lower budget. I mean, you still have to show that other world from time to time, and it is a wonderful fantasy world as well.
And you just made me think of another fantasy series that really does deserve a really, really devoted treatment, and that's Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. That would be phenomenal.
If you follow the endless storylines, like, he tells so many different stories within that world, and we've seen spin-offs from that book, and most recently a TV series based off of spin-off, which was Lucifer.
Yes. And
Lucifer quitting hell. That all happens in Sandman.
Yes.
So...
Well, it's part of the Sandman universe.
It's part of that Sandman universe. So, but specifically around those endless characters, I think would be great. And there has been talk about a death movie for quite some time, which you can do fairly low budget if you adapt something like The High Cost of Living.
Oh, for sure.
And it would be a nice, cheap entryway into that world without having to spend a ton of money. You can do that fairly cheaply, see how the audience reacts to it, and then you can go bigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a complete story in and of itself.
It really is, yeah.
But it's a difficult one, but I think if you come in through the back door like that, you could get it off the ground.
Yeah, but just because the character lends itself so well to that whole fantasy fantastic genre. Right?
Yeah, you could do it as a series of linked movies, like following a
Nice.
different end list before you can get to something bigger.
Yeah.
Like, man, there's so much you could do there.
Well, yeah, you can pluck out like Delirium's story because there's this whole story arc in there sort of revolves around Delirium. Right? I mean, they're not all about Sandman, so you could like cherry pick a lot of these.
Oh, you
story
could turn
arcs out.
that into like a Harry Potter length franchise before you get to something really big.
Yeah.
Because, you could just pluck this story and pluck this story, and they'd all stand alone as really fine movies.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'd be on board with that.
I do want to end this on probably the biggest classic in the genre, and that is The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
I think that's probably the first most people are exposed to as children, and is definitely the Fantasy Quest movie.
Without a question.
Yeah.
With a surprisingly unique twist given the time when the film was made, and credit to Frank Baum for writing a strong female character as his hero.
Yes.
Or heroine. I mean, we use them interchangeably now, but heroine at the time, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Dorothy is this incredibly nuanced and well-written character, right? Considering, again, the time. I mean, the books were written in the early 1900s, were they not?
Yeah, like 1919, I think.
And it's surprising
Something
how
like that.
few attempts at those other novels there are. There was another Disney movie later on, which was Fairuza Balk.
Fairuza Balk, yeah.
Okay. And
Which
that-
was frightening as a child.
It's kind of scary, but the stuff they do
Dark.
in that movie is really cool. Like,
It doesn't get the credit it deserves.
It's really a
It's a good movie.
I mean,
Yeah.
and it introduces TikTok, who was actually a very predominant character in the rest of Baum's books.
Yeah.
Right? But then we had The Great and Powerful Oz a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, sorry about that one.
Yeah.
That was meant to kind of be a prelude to The Wizard of Oz, and oof, eek,
No. Yeah, no.
that was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
And I think it was supposed to be a franchise in and of itself.
And as you talk about like a good, strong female character, like, I don't know, The Great and Powerful Oz, like, let's take a really good female character and then let's wreck two more.
Yes.
Like, let's take what was good and make it all horrible.
Yeah, because when you think about it, all the really strong characters in those books are female. You've got Dorothy, you've got Glinda. I mean, even the Wicked Witch is a strong, powerful character.
Yeah.
Right? And throughout the books, that continues.
Yeah, and then in this one, they're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we better make the guy the protagonist. No, why? You know, he's the Wizard of Oz. He's a guy at the end behind a curtain. That's who he is. You know what? He's the sword and the sorcerer of the Wizard of Oz. We don't need to see him for 90% of the film.
Yeah.
But he's in the title. That's what the interpretation should have been, guys.
Really,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because his character is a weak little coward, even in the Wizard of Oz, right? He sees his opportunity
Yes.
to go home, and he leaves without Dorothy.
Yeah, well, this opportunistic character, it doesn't make for a good lead.
No.
You don't care what happens to him. You want bad things to happen to him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, he's completely ancillary to the whole thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't matter. In the whole Wizard of Oz, it's like the Wicked Witch of the West and Dorothy. The wizard doesn't really matter. He's the end game, but then okay, here's the thing. He's the end game, but they go there to get stuff from him. Guess what? You had it all along. So he doesn't even give you anything.
Yeah.
It's a quest with no payoff.
Yeah. No, don't watch that one, guys. Watch Wizard of Oz, and what's the Disney one called? I don't remember.
Return to Oz.
Return to Oz.
Yes, and
watch
it's
that.
really good.
It's really good.
There's another one I've got, and I've only watched maybe part of an
Is
episode.
that the animated one?
There's a miniseries called Tin Man.
Oh, Tin Man. Yeah.
Oh, it's really good.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting interpretation of the Wizard of Oz story.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, but it is definitely only inspired by
Yeah.
the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, it's not a strict adaptation by any stretch.
Yeah, but it's at least something closer to what the intention of the Wizard of Oz is supposed to be.
No, it's interesting. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up. There's lots more to talk about in the fantasy world, and you guys can tell us what you would like us to cover. Maybe we'll talk about your favorite fantasy film in a future episode.
Yeah, there's got to be a bunch.
Yeah, there's so much more. What are your favorites? We want to hear about it. You can do it over at Twitter at Invasion the Remake, Invasion the Remake at gmail.com, and Invasion the Remake on Facebook. just let us know. Make us suggestions. If you see us making a post, like, share it with your friends list, and please subscribe through whatever feeds you hear us on. We're on iTunes and Stitcher, Player FM, Google Play Music, Audio Boom, TuneIn Radio, and so many more. So many places you can hear us. So when you're there, write us a short review. Give us 5 stars while you're there. It takes no time at all, and believe me, it helps us immensely. They use that as an aggregate, and we can get featured on the front page, and more people get to listen to our audio goodness.
Yeah. It's the sorcery through which we gain more power, but we'll use it for good, guys.
Yes.
We promise.
We won't abuse our power.
Yeah. Okay, I told you not to do that, or they won't do it.
Right, sorry. Power.
It's going to be
it's hard not to. It's like a belt.
He's actually like starting to inflate from holding it in. So
yeah. Please don't let that color your desire to give us more power.
Rate, review, and subscribe.
Yes, yeah, and don't worry, Trish and I are here to balance out Jay. It's all
exactly.
Yeah, my megalomania.
Don't make us slay Jay, but we will if we have to.
Oh, back to that. All right, well, that's it for this week. Next week is Clash of the Titans, and that'll end our fantasy-filled June, so don't miss that one, and then we'll be back to our regular remake stuff, which is whatever we feel like doing.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Or if you let us know, again, on all those information boards, let us know something you'd like.
Yeah, if there's another theme month, if you like the theme months, let us know, because we will do more of them if we think it's a valid idea.
For sure. And as long as we don't have to do them every month.
No, not every month.
No.
Not every month. Once in a blue moon.
Sometimes we inadvertently get on a roll, but that just happens.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how this one started, and then I'm like, I want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
So that's how Fantasy June happened. So, all right, guys. Well, I've been Jason.
I'm Sam.
I'm Trish.
And we are going to magically disappear out of here.
I'm going to grab a flying monkey. I'll see you guys later.
Okay. I won't stand under it because I hear they poop and like to throw.
No, it's better than Uber.